Welcome to the Right Academy. I'm Matthew R. Miller. We've been talking about archetypes, plot archetypes, character archetypes. Today I'd like to talk about setting archetypes. Now, just real quickly, an archetype is a theme or symbolism that we see repeating in literature throughout all of history, throughout all of humanity, all different cultures, all different styles of storytelling. These themes, these archetypes keep coming up again and again. And the theory is that it's just a part of the way our brain works as humans. It's a symbolic way that our minds understand the world around us. And that's really the ultimate goal of storytelling, writing, storytelling orally, making movies, is to try to understand the world around us in an entertaining way. Now, I don't think there's a set number of setting archetypes. In fact, you can set your story anywhere you want. But the setting is going to be one of a certain number of patterns. And I'm just going to talk about some that I personally know and use, and how you can use them, what they can mean. The first is the maze. Now, with all of these, they don't have to literally be what the name says, but let's think about what a maze is. It is a place people are trying to get through, and it's confusing, and it's difficult to get through, and it requires skill and often teamwork. Now, you might have a literal maze, such as in the Maze Runner, right? Or you might have a figurative maze, such as it could be a city that someone's trying to get through. One of my books, Obelisk, is set in a future dystopian city, and it is sort of a maze in that it's very complex and winding and difficult. Another one is the forest. The forest represents nature, the wildness, the chaos of nature, the unknown, the uncivilized, where the characters' natural animalistic selves come out. As humans, we're human, but we're also animals in both senses. And so part of us is civilized, part of us is wild. And sometimes we need to reconnect with that wild side in order to really understand the world around us. Hence the trope or the archetype of the werewolf in horror. Examples of this could be The Lord of the Rings, great example. They go through lots of wilderness. Some of it's literally a forest, but it doesn't have to be only a forest. It's wilderness, a wild place. Another one could be the desert. As opposed to the forest, which is full of life, much of which can be dangerous or confusing or chaotic, the desert is a place of emptiness. It is where the character must be by themselves and rely only on themselves. And so it's a place of contemplation, of philosophy, of like the character going on an internal journey, a spiritual journey, if you would. One of the most ancient archetypes we see in storytelling is that of the cave. In fact, did you know that indigenous Americans, the people who lived here before the Europeans came, most of them had a creation story, a creation myth that their ancestors, the first people, came up out of caves in the ground. The cave represents hidden mysteries, truth that must be sought out, rebirth, passing into another sort of world. Okay? Examples of this could be, well, one obvious one is Plato, wrote about the cave, right, his allegory. Also, if you've seen the film The Descent, which I believe is based on a book, its characters have to go down, face their realities, face the monsters, both literally and figuratively, and come back up reborn. Another setting archetype is a castle. Castle, again, doesn't have to be a literal castle, but it can be. We see this in Dracula. It's a great example. It kind of represents, sure, protection, power. It also represents isolation and imprisonment for those inside. Think about in Harry Potter series, Hogwarts represents safety to them, but to Dracula, his castle represents isolation and loneliness from the natural world. Another archetype is the ocean, the waters, the open waters. The ocean can symbolize subconsciousness because it's deep and it's wide, and there's a lot underneath that we don't know about, even still to this day. It represents a certain wildness, a certain unpredictability, vastness, openness, exploration, and even a lot of mystery. And so think about Moby Dick, right? That great novel. The ocean represents the vastness and the unknown, and the whale itself, and Captain Ahab, right? He's seeking out this whale, but he's a man, he's a character with a lot of vast unknown parts of his own self, and so the ocean represents that. Another setting archetype is the island. It can be in the middle of the ocean. The island represents solitude, being alone, but also a sense of safety and security within a wild world. It can also, such as in The Lord of the Flies, be kind of a small example or a microcosm of the outside world, the quote-unquote civilized world. If you read The Lord of the Flies, you know that the kids go crazy and they basically turn into warring tribes. And it's kind of like it kind of implies that that's a natural part of being human. Another one that I love is the city. Cities are complex. They're big. They have all sorts of different kinds of people and things. They have great things, bad things, danger, safety, comfort, death, life. Everything is in the city. I've been fortunate enough to live in some really big cities in my life. New York City. I lived in China, in Beijing, which is over 20 million people. And so basically, the city represents for a lot of people opportunity, but also great challenge and struggle to get that opportunity. In the Middle Ages and late Middle Ages, Renaissance, when people started moving to cities more and more, it was because they had opportunities. They could be merchants. They could make a lot of money, like the Medici in Italy, but also at great challenge because everyone else there is also struggling and in a sense is your competition. What about mountains? Mountains represent challenges, quite literally and figuratively. You've got to climb up the mountain and it's difficult. And once you reach the peak, you've accomplished your goal, but you still have to get back down. Go back to the Lord of the Rings. You have the Misty Mountains and so forth. And so mountains kind of represent a great obstacle, a great challenge that must be overcome. Another setting archetype is the crumbling ruins. So this could be literally the ruins of a civilization or the ruins of a building. Richard Matheson wrote the novel I Am Legend, where he's like the last human on Earth. The narrator is the last human on Earth in a world of these kind of vampire-like creatures and living in the ruins of society. So ruins represent decay. They represent the ultimate end of everything. They remind us of our mortality. They remind us of how vast time is and how short our own lives are. And they represent also nature reclaiming civilization. Another setting archetype is the garden. Have you ever read The Secret Garden? Isn't that a lovely little book? I read that when I was young. And the garden kind of symbolizes this place that's set aside from the world, that's innocent, that's pure, like the Garden of Eden. It's a place of self-exploration, of growth, but not too much growth, because if it becomes overgrown, then you're choked. Or if you leave it, if you grow so far that you leave the garden, you're no longer protected. So it's kind of an innocent little place where the character can withdraw and experience some introspection and reflection. One thing I notice in my books that I keep writing about tunnels. Like a lot of them, the characters end up in these tunnels. And so I started thinking, what is going on with me? And tunnels kind of represent the subconscious. They represent hidden things. They also represent kind of another world, right? You have the air, you have the sky, then you have the ground, then you have the water, then you have tunnels. They're different worlds, different planes of existence. And so it's kind of a subconscious, exploring the things within us that we struggle with, and hopefully coming up out of the tunnel again, a new person, transformation. An interesting setting archetype that has always been around in a sense in the terms of the sky, the heavens, but in a modern world is outer space. As we more and more are able to explore outer space and leave the planet Earth, even though for now just a little way out, but maybe one day much farther. Open space, the universe, represents infinity and how insignificant we feel and seem, the character feels and seems, compared to what's out there. Some interesting examples of this are 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then, of course, you have the kind of comic Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, great book, but also kind of funny. A couple of more setting archetypes are heaven and hell, and they're opposites, right? Heaven is perfection, hell is destruction. And you can make use of those. And again, it doesn't have to be literally in heaven or hell in a religious sense. It can be hell on earth, it can be heaven on earth, it can be a place that to the character seems like heaven, like home, or a place that to the character seems like hell. Like the person from the country moving to the city, often they'll think the city is just hell on earth. And so those are just some setting archetypes you can use in your writing. If you're a new writer, I recommend using these. Sometimes it's hard to think of a setting, and sometimes it just comes across as, well, I've got to put my character somewhere, so let me just make up a room. But everything in your writing should have a purpose, especially the setting. The setting itself becomes another character in the story. I write horror, and I've written books in haunted houses. And in a haunted house, like a ghost story, that house had better be a part of the story, better be a character in the story, or it's going to be boring. What was the Haunting of Hill House and then Hell House, Shirley Jackson and Richard Matheson, respectively, are two ghost stories, kind of, where you have the house as an absolute, almost an alive, a living character as a part of the story. So choose your setting carefully, because it's not something you should randomly come up with. You should think about this. Use one of these archetypes. And again, if you want to set let's say you want it to represent hell, it doesn't literally have to be the flames of hell. It can be something that is hell-like. And again, the purpose of these archetypes, the reason they exist, is because they are the places, the situations we keep finding ourselves in as human beings, and they help us symbolically to understand the world around us. And the more your reader can relate to your setting, your plot, your characters, the more they're going to be immersed in your world, and the longer they're going to stay there and want to stay there. And so what you want to do is create a setting that that the reader falls in love with, so that they just don't want to leave. If you break that immersion, then you failed as a writer. And so basically you have to get the reader's trust, bring them into your world, and make it such a fascinating but also symbolic place that they can say, hey, I may not have been to that exact same place, but I can relate. It reminds me of this or that. So I hope that helps. Archetypes are very important, and mastering them, learning them, using them in your writing will make your writing great. It will elevate it a lot. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon in the page description. And I'm Matthew R. Miller. You've been watching the Write Right Academy.